How will you serve the world? What do they need that your talent can provide? So the effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is.
There was no easy way to make this video. I thought about it, and I thought about it some more, and some more, and some more. And no matter what approach I took, what perspective I came from, what angle I shared from, there was gonna be this friction. I'm sure you're gonna feel it as you watch this video, whether you're a carrier, a tech vendor, or an agent. And that inability for me to tell this story in a way that made everybody happy almost made me not tell it. But I've come to the realization that there are things that happen inside this industry, inside every industry, that aren't happy, that cause friction when they're talked about, and that we shouldn't shy away from talking about them just because of that, especially considering the makeup of the independent agent channel, which operates in this juxtaposition where each pillar of the industry has to think about themselves, has to operate from a place of competition, but in the same vein, has to equally care that everyone succeeds, because if they don't, then no one succeeds. So, all that being said, I don't take this matter lightly. I don't talk about it to get attention, but I do talk about it because I believe it's part of a conversation that needs to happen in order for this channel to truly succeed. Okay, so first, what is data muling? It's a company using agency level, or what we call last mile data, to grow their business in some way without fair compensation for the usage of the agency's asset. That was a lot. Let's take a step back. I'm gonna give you two stories, two examples that'll make that definition much clearer. The first is actually an email that I got from an agent a couple weeks ago. Before I share this email with you, let's talk a little bit about the nature of your relationship with comparative raters. 5, 6, 7 years ago, the core value that a comparative rater brought to the insurance industry was its ability to connect carriers and agents together during the marketing process. But as of April 19th, 2019, and I'm sure before that, that value proposition has expanded. If you've watched any of my other videos, I've talked to you about the value of your data, agency-made last mile data. If at any point you've thought, I don't know, Sid, I don't know that my data is really that valuable in the marketplace. Nationwide, just last month, has decided to purchase comparative rater carrier data from EasyLinks, PL Rater, and IBQ. So, you are going out and spending your valuable time, resources, dollars to collect this data. You're inputting it into a comparative rater, and that comparative rater is not just making a profit off of you and the carrier, but also off of your data. Is your data valuable? Yes, it's valuable enough that carriers are willing to pay for it. This is proof right here that carriers are literally willing to give dollars for this data. Okay, now why is that? Well, the email goes on to explain the data now allows Nationwide to see how we show up in the comparative raters within the agency, state, or as a carrier. Looks like December through February, we have been coming in number 1 or number 2 between 42 and 60% of the time when compared to the other 4 to 5 carriers you are quoting us against. Now, you could say, well, Sid, they don't want my data. They don't want last mile data, agency level data, but they want the insights that these raters are providing because of my data. They just want the ability to see where they stack against other carriers. That's technically not my data, even though my data is powering those insights. Okay, let's read the last sentence. Nationwide is extremely focused on growing in blank and surrounding counties, so I'm expecting now that we have auto and home data for every agency who uses a comparative rater and has us loaded. We will be better able to position ourselves to deliver on being number 1, number 2, or number 3. That's the kicker. So not only do they want to understand how they compare to other carriers, part of their solution is having that agency level data, that last mile data on consumers. Auto and home data for every agency. Auto and home data is not where do I as a carrier rank against other carriers. It is consumer data that the agency is collecting, that the agency spent resources on. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, comment, message me, whatever you need to do. My point in saying this is questioning or doubting whether your data is valuable. Just stop. Don't do it. Don't question it. It is valuable. People are paying for it right now. They paid for it in April of 2019 and they're probably still paying for it. And you have to wonder what is Nationwide doing with auto and home consumer data? What are they doing with it? What do they need it for? I'm not going to answer that question here, but I do think it's one that we should be asking, especially considering that is data that we collected, that by all rights belongs to the independent agent. So I very much appreciate that email being sent over. I'm sure it wasn't a fun one to get. Sure wasn't a fun one to talk about, but certainly a worthwhile conversation to have. The next story I want to explain is actually a phone call that I received from an agent about 3.5 weeks ago. This agency explained a very interesting encounter that he had with a progressive sales rep in the first quarter of this year. Sales rep comes in, pumped, talking about how great the numbers look. They're up compared to the last quarter. They're up compared to the same quarter last year. Everything's great. Everything's awesome. But there's a problem. The agent wasn't putting the snapshot device inside enough of his clients' cars. And that was a problem because this sales rep was being held to a certain number of activated snapshot devices every quarter. And the agent wasn't helping him meet that. If you don't know what a snapshot device is, it's essentially a little mechanism that is put inside personal automobiles that track driving behavior and sends that behavioral data directly to Progressive Insurance. They're often positioned as giving the client a better customer experience, which isn't untrue, but is only half the story. The other half of the story is that Progressive Insurance, if you're paying attention, if you watch what moves they've made in the last 5 or 6 years, you know that Progressive Insurance is just laser focused, narrowly focused on data and analytics, business intelligence, data science as a competitive edge. This is a company that is very smartly, I respect them more than they could know, for leading the charge in this area. So this is a company integrating behavioral data into their underwriting process. And it's not just happening with personal auto, it's happening with commercial auto through their Smart Haul program. And all this focus on data has allowed them to fine-tune their rates and their operations to come out ahead. In 2018, they reported an overall combined ratio of 90.6. And by the way, while the US commercial auto industry produced a combined ratio of greater than 100 for its 8th consecutive year, Progressive sits at 86.67. So everyone else is at over 100. They're sitting at 86.7. 86 point. That is a massive gap. How did that happen? I mean, honestly, you have to commend Progressive for leading the charge in this area, for being the ones bold enough to say, let's try it. And pushing and pushing and pushing until they were successful with it. But as much as I commend them for leading the charge in that area, I also question the environment that they're creating around the collection of some of that data. An environment that simply sees agents as a free source to collect data that will and already has been proven to create much better margins for them. And in the event that agents aren't willing to cooperate, like my friend who gave me a call 3.5 weeks ago, you whip out your stick of power and say, look, this is just how it's gonna be. Right. If you know that agents are creating better margins for you, and by the way, this doesn't just apply to Progressive Insurance, this is any carrier, any vendor, anyone. If you know that agents are creating better margins for you, one, by doing more, right? Putting a snapshot device, convincing their clients, having that conversation, managing that extra part of that relationship, doing more, which is not free, and two, by giving up last mile data, agency level data, then the least that you can do, besides having an honest conversation about the whole story, and if we're gonna have the customer experience, this helps make your customer experience better conversation, then we're also gonna need to have a retention conversation, which I would love to see some data on whether snapshot devices help me retain customers, help me give them a better experience, not just, let's just say it because we think it's true. But besides all that, the least that you can do is give them a point kickback. I don't know how else to say this other than using your platform of power, because you're the big kid on the block, to force someone to give you something for free that does cost them money. It is more work. And that makes your business more profitable. It's kind of mind-boggling to me. And here's why I say all this. Progressive Insurance was one of the first carriers to step out and say, we are going to intertwine in a way that can't be separated data, science, and every other part of our business. We're going to use data in a way that not many have before in underwriting and operations and sales and service, which is fantastic. And like I said, I commend them. I'm glad that they led that charge. But as more follow, what is the environment that we're creating? What is the tone of partnerships in the independent channel between vendors, agents, and carriers? If we aren't intentional in the way in which we set up those partnerships and we take advantage of platforms of power, I do wonder about the future of the independent agent channel. The tone of that agent when he was explaining the situation to me was one of frustration. Imagine if the tone of that conversation was the opposite. Imagine if he was more than willing to get snapshot devices inside clients' cars because it benefited the consumer, because it benefited him, because it benefited the carrier. Data is going to cause us to redefine, recreate this marketplace. And it's a chance for us to look at our partnerships and say, how can we make them stronger? How can we respect the value of the last mile data and those who are collecting it? And the other side of this conversation is that in a way, agents are allowing this to happen by not paying attention. And if we continue to not pay attention 3, 4, 5 years down the road, the ecosystem around data is going to already be set in place. The rules will have already been defined by not us. So this is the chance. Pay attention right now to what is going on, how data is impacting our industry, and what that means for you. Pay attention to that. Have these conversations. Think about these things and act. It's as much our responsibility to ask for it as it is for someone else to give it.
How will you serve the world? What do they need that your talent can provide? So the effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is.